Alex Sherman, welcome to the Sport Profile.
Thanks, Dylan. My pleasure to be here.
You were just talking about the new ESPN direct-to-consumer product. Don't know how much you're able to share about it, but what have been your general thoughts about all the recent developments in streaming as of late? Because it seems to be there's been a lot in like a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think the ESPN product is very much the symbol for the entire shift from traditional TV to streaming, and it's really the last major obstacle in many ways from people's full transition, if they want, from the cable bundle to a hodgepodge of streaming services. And there's a reason it's the last one, because ESPN makes the most money of any cable network from the traditional bundle. So, they've kind of wanted to. They've only gone kicking and screaming to the streaming world. It's also why this new direct-to-consumer product will cost you $30 a month. Like they are not going to just give away their programming, and in fact, they have many existing contracts with pay TV providers that prevents them from simply giving away their programming. So they need to price it at a higher price point based on many of these existing contracts that they have with Comcast and DirecTV and Dish, et cetera. The ESPN direct-to-consumer product comes out this week, and if you spend the $30, you'll be able to find it. Also, if you are a cable subscriber for DirecTV, Charter, a couple other ones, you'll get it through authentication. In other words, you'll click on the app. You'll be able to say, hey, look, I'm a cable subscriber. You won't get it yet for Comcast, YouTube, Dish, Cox. Those will come. ESPN wants all pay TV subscribers to have this. And that sort of speaks to my earlier point, which is that ESPN doesn't really want you canceling cable. But if you don't get cable, then they do want you still accessing their programming if, in fact, you have a desire to do so.
Right, and that makes sense.
That is the point of this direct-to-consumer product.
So when you said the word bundle, it automatically brought me back to this reply that I saw just from somebody on Twitter. It was replying probably to one of your things, and it said, let's just bundle all these streaming services together and call it cable.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
So lots of people say that, and I have a more nuanced take on that.
Do you see the humor in it, though?
I mean, yes, but I also see a glibness that's not warranted, because all of the cable subscribers have been clamoring. They for many years they have protested against cable because they say it's too expensive. And what have they advocated for? Well, they want a more a la carte thing where it's like, well, I don't want the whole bundle. I just want this and this and this. Well, guess what? We got it. You got your a la carte. Now you don't need to subscribe to it all. So for those that say, let's just bundle it up and call it cable, you just argued against that. And maybe you didn't argue vocally against it, but you argued through cancellation of your service against it. So we have now wound up in a place where I think from a consumer standpoint, it's way better than anything we've had before. Because now at least you have the choice to say, I want this, I don't want that. So I can bundle it together, and maybe it comes out to a price point that roughly approximates cable. But if you don't want to pay that, then cut back on your services. At least now you have the option of doing that. Never before have you had that option.
Right. Nobody's ever complained about having too many options.
Right. Exactly. It's a good analogy would be going to a diner or whatever and being like, this menu, like there's too much stuff on this menu. Like I wish there were only 3 things that I could eat. It's like, well, a lot of people may want a lot of other things. And if you only want 3 things to eat, like, guess what? Those 3 things are still on the menu. So no big deal if it has 20 options.
You could probably also make whatever those 3 things are at home.
Well, that's true, right? Yes, right. If you're that upset with the current pay TV environment, you don't have to watch pay TV at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question: what are some of your favorite shows that are not sports TV?
Yeah.
And I'm curious also, since you mentioned diners, what is your go-to diner order if you have one?
Okay. First question on the shows. I'm not going to shock too many people with any of these answers because they're fairly popular shows, but I love Severance. I loved Succession. I'm a huge White Lotus fan. Let me see some other shows that I've enjoyed recently. I loved the first season of Squid Game. The second season and the third season went severely downhill, I think, like many other people think. But I did watch them. Uh, let's see. Other non-sports stuff that I have enjoyed recently. You know what? It's not a show, but I just finished the Billy Joel documentary on HBO, which I
How
thought
is it?
was,
I am
oh, it's
dying to see
fantastic.
it.
I thought it was so good, particularly the first part. I mean, I would say I enjoy documentaries maybe slightly more than the average person to begin with, but like I thought it was incredible. Like I would watch the whole thing again. It was that good, even though I just saw it. I would watch the whole thing, parts one and two, which were hours long.
Really?
It's just it's a great retelling in many ways of his music from an autobiographical standpoint. Because I've been a huge fan of his since I was a kid, but I
Totally.
did not realize how autobiographical all of his songs are. And
Really?
it's really sort of like a telling of his life, and sort of a sequential telling of his life in a way that I didn't realize. Particularly because if you go to a Billy Joel concert or you buy a greatest hits album, all of his songs are all over the place, right? So there's
Yeah.
no chronological order to his life. You would have to listen to the albums in order, but the documentary puts it in order for you.
Hmm.
So just I got a huge appreciation for him and his music that way. Your other question was the diner order. I definitely have one that stands above all others, and that is a tuna melt with Swiss cheese.
Interesting.
That's my go-to diner order.
What diner do you like to get that at specifically? Is there one that
Well,
does
I
it
live in
better?
Princeton, New Jersey now, so there's that we have like a Princeton diner, which is sort of my
And I love
go-to these
it.
days. When I lived in New York, which I did for a decade, I mean, I don't know, there were like there were so many choices. I'm not even sure, I can even think of one because they were just like
Yeah.
they were all good. Every diner on every block was fine.
Right.
Yeah,
I went to Ryder, so my friends and I would always go up to Princeton and go to Say Cheese on Nassau Street,
yeah,
and
sure.
it's phenomenal.
Yep, that's a good one, definitely. Um,
Also, Hoagie Haven.
Hoagie Haven is
Yeah, you know Hoagie Haven?
Oh, I mean, I know all of them. There's not that many restaurants in Princeton, so I'm aware of all of them, I think. Yeah, my kids love Hoagie Haven. They love the greasiness of
Have you
Hoagie
let them
Haven.
have a Sanchez?
I've let they can if they want. They don't want that actually. So they like more plain stuff. I think they want plain French fries and like a plain cheesesteak or
That's fair.
yeah, yeah.
My friend Jordan and I have a tradition of going to Hoagie Haven and having a Sanchez together. We probably do it like once like a quarter, basically. It's like a good meetup spot in the middle for us, but we always get a Sanchez.
Do you want to tell people what a Sanchez is? I think you'd have to be
That's
a
a
local.
really good question. So I probably should. So a Sanchez is Hoagie Haven's like staple sandwich, and it's like a foot. Would you call it like longer than a foot?
It's at least a foot.
It's at least a foot, and it has mozzarella sticks, French fries, chicken, and Sanchez sauce on it, which is like their signature sauce. I personally don't like mozzarella sticks. Burn me at the stake, if you will. But so I get it without mozzarella sticks. But it's the best, and I encourage everybody to go try it. You will either feel great afterwards, or you'll regret it. Choice
Free
is yours.
advertising for Hoagie Haven.
What?
I said free advertising for Hoagie Haven.
Totally, I would love.
They
I'd love
don't
a
need it.
sponsor
Very
from them.
popular place. Yeah.
Speaking that you live in Princeton, you went to Harvard for school, and I'm curious if you ever attend Princeton events when they play Harvard.
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, we were just thinking about potentially planning my oldest son's birthday around the Princeton Harvard football game this year, because it's very close to his birthday. So yeah, I try to go to the football game every time it's in Princeton, the Harvard Princeton football game. I used to announce the Harvard football games for the Harvard radio station when I was a student there. We try to go to at least one Harvard basketball game per year. Again, typically when it's in Princeton, we will go to that. We've gone to Harvard Princeton baseball games before. I'm trying to think if there's any other sport that we've seen, but for sure, a basketball game and a football game every year.
What are some of the misconceptions of like the Ivy League that you've seen from like the sports side?
The level of competition in particular sports is extremely high, and the level of competition in other sports is middling. And so you have to pick and choose your sport in many ways. I mean, Princeton is a dominant player in certain sports, but they tend to be smaller sports. And so, you have to figure, like, if you're a soccer fan or a lacrosse fan, you can watch really high caliber play. Tennis tends to be very high in the Ivy League. Certainly a lot of the smaller sports like crew rowing, it's kind of top of the line. So, I would say one misconception there is that all the sports are sort of like football. Like, that is not true.
Yeah.
Like, the Ivy League is at the top of the level of many sports, in part because they simply have the sport to begin with. Like, I think Harvard had 41 maybe different sports available. That may be both men's and women's combined there. I'll have that. You're tapping my memory, and that statistic's also from like 20 years ago when I went. But the point is that they tend to be at the top of the game in certain smaller sports. But when it comes to the bigger ones, they can't compete at the national stage because, to your point, they're not giving away these huge athletic scholarships to get top-tier talent. And that has always been the way the Ivy League schools worked.
No, that makes sense. Something I'm super curious about is your entry into the sports business space. You were at Bloomberg for a very long time, and during my first professional role at Sportico, I was very fascinated about why people got into sports business. I'm curious to you, what fascinates you most about covering the business of sports? Because it's not something people really see, but it's going on every single day.
Yeah, so my answer to this one may not be sort of what you expect. I started in 2008 as an intern, and I remember either during the internship program or, I don't know, coming right out of it, I had a conversation there was a guy that kind of led the internship program. His name was Tom Catiliano. And Tom's asked me, like, okay, what do you want to do at Bloomberg? And I knew very little about business. I mean, the only reason I was doing the Bloomberg internship to begin with was, A, it was in New York, B, it paid very well, and C, I had taken one business of journalism class, or how should I say, it's not business of journalism, a journalism class about business that was taught at Northwestern, and it was co-taught by Tom Catiliano, who then kind of pitched the Bloomberg internship during the course of the class. So it was like half taught by a Northwestern professor, half taught by Tom, and then he very much encouraged people to sign up for the Bloomberg internship at the end of it. So I did, and I was chosen, and he asked me, what do you want to cover? And I said, I don't know that much about business. I do know about sports, though. I mentioned in brief that I used to announce the Harvard football games. I wrote for the Harvard Crimson all 4 years I was in school. I wrote for my high school newspaper. I even wrote when I was an eighth grader about women's field hockey at my high school level. That was my first paid job. Then I was the editor-in-chief of my high school paper, and I wrote sports for that for 3 years before my senior year. So I had lots and lots of sports journalism experience. I had no sports business experience, but at least I knew sports. So I said, how about I do that? And he said, don't do that. Nobody cares about sports business at Bloomberg. Do something else or your career will sort of wither and die here. And you can ask Scott and Eben what they think of that comment now, but I think in some ways they would agree. Sports business was not a high-profile job at Bloomberg at all. And in fact, that's why they left, because it just was never going to get the oxygen there. So I said, okay, I won't do that. And so I did like a whole, I don't need to get into my entire career, but I ended up starting on the TV side. I did that for 18 months. Then I switched over to the reporting side, which is what I always wanted to do. And I went through this kind of rotation program, and I ended up after 9 months covering the pay TV industry, which was just a random assignment. I mean, there was a little bit of back and forth about was this something that I might be interested in.
Right.
And I said, like, well, sure, like I like TV and like I think the media industry is interesting. So I didn't know anything about it, but I started covering Comcast, DirecTV, Dish, these pay TV providers. Time Warner Cable was in existence then. And so I started to learn the business of these companies, which was a lot of it was about broadband internet, and then some of it was about distributing pay TV. And after doing that for a few years, all of these companies started to merge with each other. Comcast tried to buy Time Warner Cable, and that deal was blocked. And then Charter bought Time Warner Cable, and Dish Network tried to buy Sprint and T-Mobile and couldn't get things done. And AT&T bought DirecTV. And so much of my time was spent on all of these mergers that the guy that ran the mergers and acquisition team at Bloomberg, whose name was Jeff McCracken, kind of saw that I was breaking news as the pay TV reporter, and he said, hey, do you want to come join my team and cover tech, media, and telecom M&A all the time? And I said, well, I'm already spending 80% of my time doing that anyways, and it's the most exciting stuff I'm writing on. So
yeah, what's another 20%?
Yeah, definitely, I'll do that. And so I did that for about 4 years. Then Jeff left to go to CNBC, and like 6 or 9 months later, I followed him over to CNBC. And then here I covered kind of the intersection between tech and media for a couple of years, and then more purely media and entertainment, all until last year, about, 18 months ago or so, when Casey Sullivan, who had recently taken over as the president of CNBC, approached me and said, look, I think we should start to cover sport more directly here. Would you sort of lead up the effort to cover sports for us? And so, 16 years later, after I had said to Bloomberg that I'd like to cover sports business, now I had CNBC coming to me and asking me, do you want to cover sports business? And so, I said, sure. And so eventually I got to the point that I thought I might be at. It just took a while.
I love that. I love how people say no to something first, and then like you said, Bloomberg wasn't going to give it the time of day, and now here you are leading CNBC's effort.
And look, I to some degree, like Bloomberg shouldn't have given it the time of day then, and it's become an issue that I think, as Casey realized, it's so central to media coverage and wealth these days.
Totally.
These like the valuations, if you look at team valuations back in 2008 and you look at them in 2025, they've just skyrocketed.
It's so much money.
Only the uber wealthy can afford these teams anymore, and that's kind of the audience that CNBC already writes about and caters to some degree and is interested in. So the cross-section of sports and wealth is just so overlapping these days that you kind of have to cover it.
When you see some of those numbers, like, the Cowboys being worth like over $10 billion, like, does it ever you ever say to yourself, damn, that's a lot of money?
Well, I mean, you think about how much money it is when you realize that when these teams are sold, there's only so many people that can buy them anymore.
Right.
Like, it really is a very small group of people that can actually afford to buy these teams. And you're starting to see these conglomerate groups buy these teams because it's kind of not only can so few people buy them, but even within that group, you have to be interested in owning a sports team. And so in this country, at least, there's only, what are we talking about? 100 people, maybe, that qualify for that? 200? I mean, you've got to be a billionaire and you have to be interested in owning a sports team. It's such a small group of people that these teams tend to now just get traded back and forth among each other rather than introducing new people to the mix year after year after year.
No, that makes sense. If you could own a team, are you partial or to which one?
Oh yeah, I'm extremely forward with this. Like, I'm a huge San Francisco 49ers fan.
Really?
That would be by far that would be my true dream job. Probably would be to own the 49ers. Yeah.
My next question was going to be
if the York family decides to sell and I somehow stumble into $10 billion, then it's probably even more than that. I'd have to pay a premium now. Let's call it $12 billion.
Right.
Yeah.
my next question was going to be if you weren't a journalist, what would you be? And I feel like you just gave me the answer.
Right, I just gave yes. That would probably be number one on my list. But it's hard to say I would be owner of the San Francisco 49ers. So
It'd be pretty
in
cool
terms of a
though.
more practical job, I mean, I've wanted to be a journalist for so long. Like I said, I was doing this in eighth grade. That is definitely at the top of my list. I mean, I probably would try. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of jobs I'd like to do, but the job itself is a little bit scary in terms of how do you make money from it. I did try stand-up comedy for a year. I would like the idea of
Really?
being like a TV comedy writer. That job I think would sound really fun to me. You know, the more I do have an answer for you, a realistic one,
Sure.
which is the more I've covered media, the more I've become interested in like media strategy. So I would, you know, I think and that kind of extends even to Hollywood and so forth. So I think that's what I would do now. I would be interested in maybe being, you know, sort of like a media executive in a certain type of role if the right thing came along. But I have no particular urge to leave journalism. So
That's so
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So, have you performed stand up at all?
I did. I did for a year. I performed it. I did a class at Comics, which doesn't exist anymore.
Is that
In
in
I want to
Jersey or
say
New York?
2009. Maybe they rebuilt it. I can't remember. It was on like 8th Avenue and 14th Street, I want to say, in Manhattan. And then uh, they basically like had it for like a small group of people. They invited you back to do these small bringer shows, they called them. So if you brought like two people to a show, then you could get up on stage and they would record you and send you a DVD. So I did that for like a year. So I was probably on stage, I'm gonna say, 10 times, and then I was like, okay, that's out of my system. I don't want to do that anymore,
I mean,
and
hey,
I
that's
didn't do
10
it
more
again.
than the next guy.
Yeah, yeah. Also, like I realized that there were potentially downsides to being a Bloomberg journalist and doing that on the side, especially as social media started to creep in there and people like could film you, and so I was like, probably better for me to stop doing that
Makes
than I
sense.
did. Yeah.
Are those DVDs stashed away in a drawer
Yes,
somewhere?
yes, I own them and they will not see the light of day. Right, until I die and my kids can decide what they want to do with them. Yeah.
Somebody who you have interviewed, people who sometimes refer to as a comedian but know him as an anchor, is Stephen A. Smith. And I feel like the obligatory question when talking about him is if you think he'll run for president.
I mean, nobody knows for sure. I think the longer it goes without a clear Democratic candidate, the higher likelihood it is that he'll actually do it. He certainly has the confidence to do it, but I do think the Democratic field's fairly wide open. So, that's probably both a reason he might do it and also a reason he might not if some other candidate happens to catch fire and he realizes that he's not going to win, because he strikes me as the kind of person that would only do it if he had a very good chance, if he thought he had a very good chance to win.
Right.
That's what he said to me originally, I think, which was that, if memory strikes me, he said, I don't want to run for president. I just want to be president.
Yeah.
So, if there was such a clear pathway that he could, in essence, kind of not run and it was very clear that he'd win, he'd do it. But I don't know if that pathway will ever exist.
Makes sense. There's two more things I want to ask you. One is, after a long day, I know you love to spend time with your kids. What are things that like keep you grounded, away from work? And when you never want to talk about an M&A or a streaming bundle ever, what's something that keeps you grounded?
For sure, the number one thing is golf. When I had kids, I really wanted to introduce them to the sport. I was very excited about that. I didn't start playing golf until I was 15. By that point, there were a lot of other kids that had started earlier than me, and I realized that if I had only started earlier, I would have been much better. And so
I was
in
gonna say,
my
I feel like
mind, I was
15's
like, I'll
pretty
have these
early.
kids. I'll play golf with them at a young age. They will get better. And what has happened is two things. One, my two oldest kids, who are 11 and 9, have no interest in playing whatsoever. And two, I have realized that if I play, I want to play alone. And so now when I play golf, recently my 5-year-old has been going with me to ride on the cart. That's a little different. But by
It's
and
fun.
large, over the past few years, I have been playing all by myself, literally by myself. Like I don't even want to be partnered with anybody.
Hmm.
I just want a couple hours on the course to play alone, and that is the best way for my own sort of mental recalibration.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Last question, and I asked this to everybody that I've interviewed on here, and that question is professionalism aside, just about you, Alex Sherman. What do you like most or admire about yourself?
Um, when I was about 22, 23, I had a job that was my only job I've ever done that was not journalism related, and it was working for a company called McMaster Carr, which was an industrial supplies company. And there was a guy, I had a desk in the office for my first year there, and there was a guy that sat right behind me who became a friend of mine. He'll never watch this. His name was Tim Hobbs. And there was one day that Tim, I remember, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said to me that I have youthfulness about me, and don't lose that. And I think the thing that I like about myself is that there's a part of me that's ingrained in me that won't take anything too seriously. Like certainly things with my family I might take seriously,
Sure.
but I can easily rationalize the various different things that in the grand scheme of things they're just not that important. And that helps me keep a pretty healthy attitude in general, I think, about life. So if you approach life with a sense of humor a lot of times, then it makes things more fun and it makes things easier. So that's what I would say.
I love that. I think that's amazing. Alex, thank you so much again for coming on. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks, Dylan. Enjoyed doing it.